was actually torn whether I would give the talk out of the Compass of Zen, and maybe just for the benefit of those listening to this talk later on the web, just to repeat a little bit what Karen said, that this time of year, it's in the Buddhist tradition, starting from the time of the Buddha and the monastic community, that they would have the rhythm of the year would be 3 months in what's called tight Dharma, and then 3 months loose. Basically, in the rainy season, the monks and nuns would gather, and they would do 3 months intensive practice, and then the monks and nuns would disperse, and they'd go out into the community, and they would teach and be with the lay people, and then they would come back after 3 months and do another 3-month retreat. In Asia, since they're on the lunar cycle, I can't tell you exactly why, but this year it started December 6th in Korea. In Providence, Rhode Island, I believe it started on January 3rd, and it will go through till, I think it's March 27th. And basically, it's called Tight Dharma, Kyolche in Korean, and it's called that because literally the retreat is essentially from 4 in the morning till 9:30 at night. There's meditation practice, chanting practice, bowing practice, work practice, a lot more meditation practice, and work practice, and it just goes round and round and round and round. Personally, I've never done the full 90 days of the Kyolche, but I have done 28 days. And every year at the end of February, starting at the last Friday in February, we do an 8-day retreat. So it's 8 days rather than 90 days, but it's the same rhythm. And it's very interesting when you get into that rhythm, the schedule and the days carry you forward. And you just watch, you just pay attention, and you just follow the rhythm of the schedule. And a Zen retreat is a group process. You eat with the group, you sit with the group, you work with the group. In many places you share sleeping space with the group. At Empty Gate Zen Center, for those who stay here overnight, they sleep in the Dharma room. And through that process, you get to see yourself. So, as Karen said, we have these talks from the Compass of Zen. And I want to, in a way, start off from what Karen talked about in her meditation instruction, of asking this great question, what am I? With that response, don't know. It's often said it takes 3 things to practice Zen: great question, great courage, or sometimes it's translated as great effort, and the third is great faith. So this question, what am I, is the great question. Sometimes it translates in our everyday life to what is this? Sometimes people use who am I? The trouble with the question, who am I, is that it concretizes you into being a person. And in Zen, we're really challenging all the assumptions and beliefs and conditioned ideas that we hold. So even if you start with, I am a person, we have to raise that question, what is a person? We think this person is this body, maybe has a mind, but if you ask in Asia, where's your mind? They'll go like this. So is that where your mind is? Is your mind in your hand? Is your mind given to you by something outside yourself? Where do your thoughts, beliefs, opinions, ideas come from? The reason the second important thing is great courage or great effort is the willingness to push through it, to really question. You know, one of the things that I've learned over the 40 years that I've been practicing is how many assumptions can rule my life without me being aware of them. So one of the reasons we raise this great question is to see all the different assumptions and the power of these assumptions. You know, so much of our conditioning happens before we're verbal. That there's so much already conditioned before we even understand what it is to be alive. So, I once worked with a computer programmer who told me that in the hardware of a computer is something called the microcode. It's before the software actually conditions the computer. But still, there's some code that's already written. And he told me that sometimes when a computer malfunctions, it's because this microcode gets corrupted, and you will see its corruption in odd and bizarre ways. Nothing that you could necessarily predict. So just imagine we have this primitive conditioning. From a psychological point of view, you can say it starts off with bonding with your parents, with your family, with your community. And in psychology these days, attachment theory is becoming quite important in the psychotherapeutic world. And just that sense of how was it when you bonded? And each of us have a different experience. But that primitive experience can have repercussions in our adult life. So we have to go pretty far back. But even that's not enough, because where do we come from? What is a human being? So Karen answered that question with don't know. Her explanation of don't know is one aspect of it. She pointed to before thinking mind. But is it preconditioned? Where did it come from? Where does it go? So I want to read a section out of this Compass of Zen. I'll read the introduction section, which is a poem. And then I'm going to read a few paragraphs, I think, to start off, and then I'll talk a little bit about it. This is called the Song of Dharma Nature. And maybe I'll read a little bit before I read it just as an introduction. This is an excerpt from a long teaching poem based on the Avatamsaka Sutra. Sometimes the Avatamsaka Sutra is called the Huayan Sutra. Those of you who were here last week, the talk was basically given on a phrase, if you want to understand all the realms of the Buddha from the past, present, and future, you must realize that everything is created by mind alone. That's a very generalized, condensed form of this Avatamsaka Sutra. It's actually quite long, probably 1,000 pages. But it's about mind. It's the sutras where the Buddha was talking about the nature of mind. And so this poem, this long teaching poem, was written by a very famous master, We Sang, during the golden age of the Shilla dynasty in Korea. I don't know for sure, but my hunch that puts it in the 12, 13, 1400s. These verses are chanted every day in most temples in Korea. They point directly to the nature of Dharma. Now I'll just read this. I'll read it. The Song of Dharma Nature. The nature of the Dharma is perfect. It does not have two aspects. All the various dharmas are unmoving and fundamentally still. They are without name and form, cut off from all things. This is understood by enlightened wisdom, not by any other sphere. The one is the many are within the one. The one is many, the many are one. Numberless kalpas are the same as one moment. One moment is the same as numberless kalpas. Now I want to read a little bit of Zen Master Bon Soeng's commentary on this. Okay, so I left out, they point directly to the nature of Dharma. Many people say Dharma is this, Dharma is that. But what is Dharma exactly? Originally, true Dharma has no name, Dharma has no form. Even calling it Dharma is already a big mistake. To add one more little piece of history for you, in the Tao Te Ching, which is Chinese philosophy before Buddhism came to China, very briefly, Zen actually was the marriage of Taoism and Buddhism. So the first line of the Tao Te Ching is, the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. And in Buddhist literature in China, Tao and Buddha, or Tao and Dharma, were used interchangeably. The Tao is unknowable. If you name it, you've made it into an object and you've lost it. I like to say in the Jewish religion, there's a rule that you can never say the name of God. Because if you name it, you limit it. What is it before its name? This is an unanswerable question that raises great doubt. And in Zen practice, we work with this great doubt in order to see more clearly, hear more clearly, perceive more clearly. Dharma is not Dharma, okay? You must understand that. So Dharma, Dharma Nature, are just names for your universal substance. Okay, here comes, this is a bit metaphysical, so breathe deeply, breathe slowly. Don't try to understand with your mind. So Dharma or Dharma Nature are just names for your universal substance. This substance, of which everything in the universe is composed, does not have two aspects. It does not even have two different forms. It also does not have one aspect or one form. It is not one and not two. It's also not a thing. It takes every form of everything in the universe, and yet it takes no form. Because form is completely empty. It is like electricity. Okay, so now he's going to give you a metaphor. This may help a little bit. It's like electricity. Sometimes electricity appears to us by making fans move and radios emit sound. It produces air conditioning. It can freeze water and heat a room. It can move a long, heavy train, and yet you walk around with it in your body. It can completely disappear into space. So if you say that electricity is just one thing, you're wrong. If you say that it is all these things that it does, all these actions that it performs, you are also completely wrong. Electricity is none of these things, and yet it is all of them. Similarly, rain, snow, fog, vapor, river, sea, sleet, and ice are all different forms of the same substance. They are different things, but H2O is unchanging and composes all of them according to their situation. They are all water. The same is true of Dharma Nature. It's not one and not two. So Dharma Nature is universal nature and takes many forms. Sometimes it's a mountain, or a river, or the sun, or the moon, or the stars. This cup, this sound, your mind, they're all the same because they're all the same universal substance. Listen to this one. This is very interesting, if you can understand it, but you can't. When any kind of condition appears, Dharma Nature follows that condition and then some form appears. When that condition disappears, name and form disappears. So what are you? I'm going to say give you a few other metaphors for this universal substance. The first one I ever heard was another one from Zen Master Bon Soeng, and it's from the first chapter of his book, Dropping Ashes on the Buddha. He says, universal substance is like cookie dough in an animal cracker factory. All the cookies are made of the same substance, but there are lions and tigers and elephants and monkeys and cats and dogs. They all have the same substance, but their name and form is different. Two other ways you can look at this. If you think of the nature of matter in the universe, in the old days when I was in high school, we talked about everything's being made up of protons, neutrons, and electrons. And if you remember back to your chemistry class, you have the periodic table of elements. All the basic elements of matter in the universe, in our known universe anyway. It's always changing. And they're all made up of the same thing. It's just a matter of how many protons, neutrons, and electrons they have. So helium has one. I sometimes mix this up. Hydrogen has two. 2 protons, 2 neutrons, 2 electrons. Oxygen has 8. Lead has some other number. Gold, something still. But they're all made up of the same substance. So all of the elements that are in our body are all made up of the same substance. It's just a matter of how many of these protons, neutrons, and electrons. These days we talk about subatomic particles, and we talk about quarks. I don't understand quarks. I don't really understand protons, neutrons, and electrons. But these are names that have been taught to me to point to something. But science doesn't understand everything either. It's always changing. We say the basic genetic code in our body is built in our DNA. What is that? And then, fascinating to me, is that there are all these aspects of our DNA that don't seem to have any purpose at all. So, as I understand it, science calls it junk DNA. But that's really all that means is they don't know what it does. See, our minds take things and shape it into name and form. But the name and form is not what it is. So what is it? The way that speaks to me most clearly these days is the image of an ocean and a wave. The ocean is full of waves, and you can track the birth, the path, and the death of one particular wave. But obviously the wave is completely the ocean. There's no separation. It's just that the wave itself has its own birth, life, and death. And that's true also for human beings. Before thinking, this Dharma nature, this universal substance, is already here. But out of conditions, Jeff appears, Karen appears, Marshall appears, all of us appear. You can even say the condition is the joining of one particular sperm cell and one egg. But all sorts of conditions had to be in place for those particular sperm and egg to come together. And how do we get from a sperm and an egg to ourselves? What is it? This universe is totally mysterious. We think we understand, but we don't. this doubt, this not understanding can be quite destabilizing. But held in the right way, it's completely opening and liberating. And Zen Buddhism is about nothing else but liberation. If you turn it to our human life, we find ourselves in these conditions. We don't understand how we got here, and we really don't understand the process of conditioning and development that brought us to this very moment. And then we find ourselves in this unsatisfactory situation. Something nags at us. Life is a challenge every day. It never resolves. It's never completely figured out. And as soon as we think we have something, it changes again. It's not what we think. Just that phrase, I am not what I think, then what am I? That's the tool we use to find out what we actually are. And from what the image that Zen Master Bon Soeng gave about electricity, you can see that it takes as many forms as the human mind can conjure up. That's how many forms appear. They come from our thinking. They return to our thinking. They have no self-nature. So what am I? What am I is the point of Zen practice. And this response of don't know opens us. Certainty closes us down. If we think we know, we don't really have to look. One time, an old teacher of mine was also a professor at a university, and he said, one time a man came to him and said, I want to be in your program, I want to be your student. And he threw on the table his dissertation. It was already done. He said, I'm not taking you. You're already closed. You're a finished product. The reason you come here is to learn, to be open, to challenge those assumptions, to try to find your way. And it's that mind that's most important, not only for our Zen practice, but for our life. If we're not paying attention, if we're not using this don't know mind to open up to the moment, we just keep repeating things over and over again. We say we want it to be different, but we do it the same. A few years pass or a few days pass, and we forget. And then the conditioning takes over, and we're just stuck like a rat in a wheel, going around and around and around. Zen practice is about waking up. It's about getting off the wheel. And from that position of being off the wheel, we can use this moment not only to understand ourselves, but to help. To interact with the world in a way that offers something rather than takes something. So, just to finish up with this idea of retreat. This weekend, on Saturday, we have a one-day meditation retreat. A one-day meditation retreat, basically we start at 9 a.m. We do 108 prostrations, which takes on about 15 minutes. Then we take a short break. And then we sit from 9:30 till noon. We sit a half an hour, so from 9:30 to 10. We do walking meditation in a group for 10 minutes. Then we sit back down. We sit for another half hour. We get up for 10-minute walking. We sit down for another half hour. We get up for another 10-minute walking. We sit another half hour. That's the morning. Then we have lunch and a little work period. And then we do it again in the afternoon. If you think of it, a weekend retreat or an 8-day retreat or a 90-day retreat, it's that same schedule except it expands on both ends. But that's it. It's a little bit of teaching, and then there's a time where each person individually comes in and meets with me in the interview room. But basically, you're sitting here, or you're walking, and you're in the group, you're held by the group, but you're on your own. And just as Karen told us tonight, you raise this question, what am I? On your inhalation, breathing deeply into your lower abdomen, your belly pushes out a little bit. What am I? Your belly gets bigger. Don't know. Falls. And you just repeat that. And you watch. And you watch. And you don't think about it, but you observe it. And in that process, you learn something about your conditioning, the way your habitual patterns, and you get some energy and power. Karen told us to surround our lower abdomen with our mudra. That's what it's called when you hold your hands. And in all of Asian Buddhism, this lower abdomen is sometimes it's called, in Japan it's called the hara. In China and Korea it's called the tangen, which literally translates energy garden. Hara is often translated as center. Sometimes I like to call it your original home. In our lives, we lose ourselves all the time. We're constantly leaving ourselves. We're sacrificing the moment. We're chasing after things. We're getting lost in confusion and desire, in fear, in anger, in delusion. And if we can return to the center, to this home, to our energy garden, we can get a little bit of stability, a little bit of peace. And from that place, we're better able to deal with the bombardment of experience that we're having. Just one breath down here can slow everything down enough that we can calmly be here. We can find our presence. We can find our mindful attention. And then we're off. And then we come back. And then we're off somewhere else. And then we come back. And we learn to come back. We practice coming back. So whether we're sitting for a half an hour, or we're chanting for a half an hour, or we're sitting for 3 days, 90 days, one moment, just return. Just return. Let go of your thinking. Let go of your feeling and observe. We call that Zen practice. Question? Anything anybody wants to talk about?
Yeah.
Please?
When you were reading in the book, you said, don't try to understand with your brain. But what do I use if I'm not using my brain to understand?
Your center. You ever hear the phrase, listen with your eyes, see with your ears? Somebody who's blind has to use their smell to be able to really see. You watch blind people navigating the streets all the time, and they can't see a thing. So when the eyes go, other senses become stronger. We're very visual, and most of us are very connected with our thinking, feeling mind. So we have to look towards other resources. So chant with your ears.
Yeah.
Use your nose to understand. Don't only rely on your eyes and your thinking.
Okay.
It's a mystery. Let the mystery inform you. When you try to understand, we generally take things and it works. In some ways it's important, we have to do it, but we reduce things, we infer things, we concretize them. And what we're trying to do is open up, break through the concrete to the essence underneath.
But if I'm reading something that I don't understand, I'm thinking, why am I doing it if I don't
That's
understand?
the problem right there.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking. You know what? Sometimes, my experience is sometimes things happen and I don't understand. And then I go to sleep. And then in the middle of the night I wake up and go to the bathroom. On the way to the bathroom, something clicks. I don't think I was dreaming about it. Clearly I wasn't thinking about it. But yet, something clicks. They say, I've heard this story that the guy who invented the Xerox machine, he worked on it and worked on it and worked on it and worked on it, and he got pretty far, but he gave up. And then he went to sleep, and he woke up and, he got it. You gotta look past what you're comfortable with, what you usually use. So if you say to yourself, I don't understand this, why am I doing this? This is a waste of my time. You're narrowing yourself and you're putting yourself in the box of what you already know. And then you die that way.
So are you telling me that I just need to read it and one day something will happen if I stay
like
open?
Poetry. Listen to, you hear a song, yeah, the words are important, but there's so much more to the song than the words.
Yeah.
Broaden your mind. Your mind is infinite. What you know is so tiny and narrow.
Okay, I think I got it. Thanks.
Anybody else? Okay.
In the meditation instruction, I forgot to say to keep the eyes open and look at a spot, 20 degrees or something in front of you?
Well, the instruction we use is keep your eyes softly focused about 45 degrees.
45 degrees. And some meditation practices you do with the eyes closed. So I wondered if you would just talk a little bit about the difference between, or the experience of...
Well, first, the heresy that I'll spout is that since some meditations are taught with your eyes closed, like Vipassana meditation in the Bay Area is a very large meditation group. They teach it with your eyes closed. Zen tends to teach it with your eyes open. My hunch is it doesn't matter. There are reasons to keep the eyes open. There are benefits to keeping the eyes open, and there are probably benefits to keeping them closed. Really, I think everybody finds their own way with that. The beauty of the eyes open is that our waking life is spent in action. And to be able to train ourselves to be able to sit Zen with the eyes open means that when we get up and we're driving, we still have the capacity to practice. Or when we take a walk, we can slowly breathe in, slowly breathe out. Maybe for myself, instead of what am I don't know, I use a mantra when I walk. But my eyes are open, I'm looking around, I'm connected to the world, but I'm also practicing. So eyes open meditation breaks down the separation between meditation and everyday life. That's why I think where Zen is so focused on the expression of truth in this very moment. Connecting to the moment, recognizing, if all Dharma nature is the same substance, we think I'm sitting over here and you're sitting over there. Relatively, that's true. But it's all the same substance. So I'm also over there, and there, and there, and in China. And maybe on the moon, and maybe into the farthest reaches of the universe that the Hubble telescope is showing us. I mean, to think we understand and we know when there are so many, I'm going to say billions, but I don't know that it's billions, of galaxies. Who knows what's going on out there? Who knows? But we like to know. We like to narrow things down, reduce it to something we can feel comfortable with. So just learning to be comfortable with doubt opens our life, gives us the possibility of breaking out of the trap, really, that we find ourselves in. Anybody else? Question? George?
A Chinese monk I once knew used to say that when you closed your eyes, it was easier to go to the movies.
Yeah.
I just like the way he put that. But I think, from personal experience, I can go to the movies even with my eyes open.
Right. Well, actually, to turn that metaphor on its head, Zen Master Bon Soeng would recommend, if you want to understand no thinking, go to the movies. The movie starts, and you're completely there. You're really not, especially if the movie draws you in, you're not thinking about your job or what's wrong with your relationship or what you're going to do next week. You're completely there. There's almost no separation between me and the movie. It's the same. The movie ends, all of that drama comes back.
That makes a lot of sense because my Buddhism professor in college used that and helped me understand it, and he was Zen Master Bon Soeng student. So I'm like, oh, I see where you got that from.
Yes.
Also, I just happened to notice that there are a lot more women here tonight than men, which is very unusual.
Very.
I'm trying to think when that's ever happened. And that kind of led me to wonder again, why is it that Zen, at least our school of it, tends to attract more men? You don't have to answer that.
I don't. I wish I knew the answer.
Yeah, it's just interesting to me.
If you all keep coming back, then
Yeah.
it'll change it right away. Yeah, no, I noticed the same thing as we were just starting practice. Yeah. One more thing about the movie, just to give you an image of things. Zen, one of the phrases we use in Zen is moment mind. Absolutely just this. And one way you explain that is when you watch a movie, it's constantly going. But if you stop the movie, one frame, it's just this moment. And if we can slow things down enough to be in just this moment, the implications are amazing. These days mindfulness has swept the country, and that's basically what mindfulness is about. Mindfulness is defined as paying attention on purpose. But if you can slow it down, then you can see it. Pain is a beautiful example of it. What is pain? Many of us feel pain, and some of us struggle with chronic pain. It's very difficult. But if you can slow down enough, you can see that pain is the name for something. There's something underlying which we call pain. Mostly we get stuck in name and form. The name becomes the thing for us. Slowing things down enough, we can actually experience the thing itself. Again, that's Zen life. Not the name. When we work with kongans or koans, I'll often say to people, show me, don't tell me. Be it, don't explain it. We mistake the explanation for the thing itself. Another way that's said in our culture is we mistake the map for the territory. We can explain it, but life is lived and experienced, not explained.
Recipe for food is another.
See again?
You can confuse the recipe with the food.
Right. People that with Facebook and those kind of things, people take pictures of their food. And then they get 50 likes. I just wonder. But take one bite, then you really understand. So our training here in this Dharma room is to be able to take a bite and actually taste it. Not just look at the picture of it and lose the thing for the image. Last thing? Question?